Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. I'm your host, Lonnie Jones, and the adventure part is basically just our experiences. And some of those experiences are as mundane as growing up, being married, being a young married couple with a kid, or being a middle-aged couple with grandkids. Some of the experiences will be my adventures as an outdoorsman, a rock climber, a fisherman, a hunter, or my experiences as a police chaplain who's been assigned to a SWAT team for over 30 years. Some of that adventure may even boil down to the idea that there's a belief that I'm a chaotic Jedi. Either way, we'll take the experiences or the adventures and we'll talk about the facts. The facts will lead to concepts, and the concepts lead to application. Basically, it will be anecdotal wisdom. One cautionary word about the facts is we will tell you the facts just as they happened, but sometimes we'll tell you the facts the way we remember them happening, and sometimes we'll tell you the facts the way we've heard other people tell us the way they remember them happening. In any occasion, it's not an attempt to deceive. There'll be a little bit of embellishment, and it's an all good, clean fun and for learning purposes only. Thank you for keeping up with Jones. Introducing the Bible degree with digital ministry. Paul used the marketplace and the synagogue to reach an expanded audience. We have access to the internet and social media. I once heard it said that when McDonald's introduced the drive-through window, they did not change the Big Mac, only how it was delivered. Faulkner University is now offering a new digital ministry track for their Bible degree. Faulkner's degree provides training in understanding and teaching the gospel, alongside training that will allow students to create quality digital content. Opportunities for evangelism in the digital spaces is unlimited, and this is innovative ministry education for our contemporary culture. One of the instructors is a 2-time Emmy-winning former ESPN designer. Members of the Church of Christ could be eligible for the full tuition Jack Zorn Scholarship in order to pursue this special area of study. For more information, contact admissions@faulkner.edu. That is admissions@faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a digital partner with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. TKM Incorporated in Moss, Tennessee is a construction company that specializes in erosion control, seeding, and soil, hydroseeding, hydromulch, minor excavation, and silt fence. They also provide traffic control and construction signs. Their business is keeping people safe, but their passion, their mission, is they wish that all men could be saved. TKM has adopted the nickname the King's Men because as they serve you, they also serve the King. If they could provide any of their services for you, please contact them at 931-243-3958. That is 931-243-3958. Or you can contact them on the net at tkminc2001@twlakes.net. That is tkminc2001@twlakes.net. TKM Incorporated is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Someone once asked me to canonize all the what they call Jones-isms, things that they'd heard me say that were either colorful or colloquial. Some of my sayings I got from a guy named John Sanford. I read a lot of his novels, and he talks about being crazy as a bucket of frogs and stuff like that. Things that I've been repeated as having said is things like hotter than the bottom of Moses' sandals. Someone has more keys than the Philippian jailer, more confused than the sign language interpreter at Pentecost, death eating a biscuit, which is a phrase that we use and we really don't even know what it means. But among those, in the list of things that are considered to be Jones-isms, I have a phrase that I use, and we folded him up like a church check. Now that could refer to jujitsu, but it really started out being referred to when we used the phrase after we shot something and it crumpled up immediately. It crumpled up instantly. You take a long distance shot, at a deer or an antelope, and you say, and he folded up like a church check. But the whole idea of being folded like a church check comes from this phenomenon of church checks and how they're folded. So the bank got new software. And so you don't have to walk in and fill out the little form, the little deposit slip, and put the account number in the little squares that are printed in ink too faded to see. You just give the check. And for those of you under, say, the age of 30, the check is a piece of paper. And on that piece of paper, it has the words "pay to the order of," and you fill in the blank who the order of is. You're going to pay the church or pay the phone company or pay an individual. And then there's a numerical value besides that, pay to the order of. And then it says, you put in your number, $200, $300, $400. And then you have to write it out in longhand on the line below it. And then you sign it, and that's a check. So you give these checks to the lady at the bank, and instead of having to fill out a deposit slip now, you just give her this thing, and they had this new little scanner. You put the check in it, and it looks like a miniature roller coaster cattle chute for checks. And if the checks aren't in pristine condition, sometimes the little machine doesn't like to handle them and doesn't like to read them. So my bank teller often chastises me because of the condition of my checks. Many of the checks that I present to her are smooth. They are pristine. They are unfolded. They came to me in envelopes. But if I hand her a check that has too many folds or maybe a little bit of a wrinkle, she looks at me as if I've given her something that Michael J. Fox tried to do origami with. Now, to be fair, she also compliments me when I give her smooth, unfolded, pristine checks as well. I'll probably speak at about 45 events in any calendar year. And many, if not most of these events, are going to be churches. Now, I don't use my consulting fees for what I charge, universities and what I charge corporations, or when I used to do ropes courses. I don't use that fee schedule to speak at churches. I don't have a set fee for speaking at churches. A church invites me to come and speak, and I go and speak, and I don't know, if they're going to pay me, and I don't really know what they're going to pay me. I wonder, since I don't have a set fee, if I could count that as tips and not pay taxes on them. I digress. Anyway, years ago, Brother Cecil May told a bunch of us young preachers, he said, "Gentlemen, if you guys get invited to speak, and it's at all possible that you can go, you should accept that invitation and go and speak, and don't worry about if or where or how much you get paid." And so when a congregation asks me to speak and I'm available, I say yes. And so I go to congregations of various sizes, and have never actually been very worried about how many people were there or how much money I would get paid, or even if I would get paid. It's been a minute. It's been a long time since I've spoken anywhere and didn't get paid. I've been doing this a long time, and people are kind to me, and I sort of have a reputation of being a speaker, and people understand that I do it for a living. And so I do get paid more often than not. It's been a long, long time since I spoke somewhere and didn't get paid. One of the universities that I speak at sometimes, they have an annual lectureship, and included in your summons to speak, you don't get an invitation, you get a summons. You've been granted the opportunity to speak there, and included in this is a requirement for you to submit a typed manuscript 6 months before the event. And included in your summons and the demand for the manuscript, you also get a request that you provide your own housing and consider donating your honorarium back to them. The second to the last time I spoke there, it ended up that I was going to speak midday, but then somebody else who was involved in a part of the program said, "Hey, if you're going to be in town, we want you to speak at an earlier slot." So I really needed to spend the night before in order to be able to get there on time. And so I just simply said, "Hey, could I get campus housing? Can I stay in one of the dorms?" And they said, "Sure, you can stay on campus, but you're going to have a background check done before you can spend the night on our campus. But most places that you go to speak are well intended and they are gracious. But I have digressed yet again. I showed up at the bank the other day and I was chagrined at the condition of the check I was presenting. The little teller behind the counter took the check from my hand and she looked at me with the way that only wives, mothers-in-laws, and the eye of Sauron have the ability to stare at you with. She gave me this disapproving, disappointed, disgusted, were you raised by wolves? This is why we can't have nice things combo look. And my only defense was out of control finance deacon. That's all I could come up with. And finance deacons, the guys at church who've been given the task of balancing and organizing the books and distributing the various checks to people, well, those are the guys who have to deal with the church checks. Now, church checks can be church checks given to the church, and oftentimes the church checks that the church receives are given to them by little old ladies. And little old ladies have their super folding powers from years of crocheting and kneading homemade bread and biscuits. And those checks gets folded up in tight configurations, apparently in an attempt to literally interpret the verse, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Now, for those of you who are taking Bible verses out of context to prove that the world is flat, you should also note that the Bible describes the chillarity or the chirality with which one can make church donations. They can only be done with the right hand because the left hand should not know what the right hand is doing. And for the third time today, I have digressed. Anyway, at some point, the finance deacon got infected by this and decided that the only way they could give a check to someone else, the only way they could give a check to a visiting preacher, was in absolute secrecy, folded up so tight you'd think they dipped it in the Marianas Trench before they gave it to you. Not only are these checks folded so tightly and so small that they are classified eyes-only top secret encryption, they are passed from the deacon to this guest speaker with the deftness of a clandestine handoff, like a spy in a Tom Clancy novel. I often refer to this guy as the deacon in charge of the drug deal or the deacon in charge of the dead drop. You finish speaking and you're standing in the back and you're talking to people as they exit and you're shaking hands and then you notice a guy walking at the periphery. He's looking at you and he's circling and you begin to hear the shark movie music. Da-dum, da-dum. Dun, 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 dun. And then there's a break in the crowd. He steps forward, shakes your hand, but inside his palm is a folded piece of paper. No envelope, just a folded piece of paper. He makes eye contact with you that says, "You never saw me." And just like that, he vanishes into the crowd. And so you put this little piece of paper in your pocket or in your Bible, and you don't even look at it until you get back home. So years ago, I was speaking at the Gurley Church of Christ. I received my invitation from their minister in residence, Jim Ashworth. Now, Jim is a wizened older minister, or he was. Jim passed away years ago. And he may have been the oldest minister that I ever knew. He was old when I moved to Huntsville, and as I lived in Huntsville for a number of years, he continued to be old. I'm not sure how old he actually was, but the rumor was that Jim Ashworth was so old that there were people in heaven who thought he had not made it. Jim's son, Andy, is a dear friend of mine and one of my favorite and most reliable interns that I ever had the pleasure to working with. Anyway, I spoke at this little church on a Wednesday night, and as the little crowd of people were exiting the building and I was talking and joking with people and shaking hands, I noticed the church check shark deacon. This tall drink of water began to kind of circle in. And I heard the shark movie music. And I kind of got caught up in it. I made eye contact with him. He made eye contact with me. He moved in and moved me out of the crowd. He turned me around away from the crowd. He presented his hand and whip, pow, and then there you go. And just like a fish shot with an arrow, he left me in his wake. And the last look he gave me caused me to hear an Obi-Wan Kenobi-esque voice say, "I was never here." I put the folded piece of paper in my pocket, resumed shaking hands with the brethren, and eventually went home. Well, I got home. I took my keys out of my pocket. I took my wallet out of my pocket. And I took my pager off my belt, and I began to reverse Rubik's Cube this check that this guy had given me. And Jack said, "Well, how did you do?" And I really think she meant, how did my presentation go? She wasn't asking about the money. She never asked about the money. But as I unfolded this little check, I said, "Well, I did really, really good or really, really bad. I'm not sure." She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I either did so good that they were overwhelmed, or I did so bad that they were embarrassed, because what they gave me was a blank check. Yeah, it says pay to the order of Lonnie Jones, but there is no amount specified. I have been given a blank check from this little church." Well, Jackie laughed and said, "Well, do you think we should pay off the car or pay off the house?" I said, "Good point. I'll ask Jim Ashworth in the morning." So I waited. The next day, I gave Jim time to get to his office, and I gave him a call, and I said, "Brother Jim, I'd like to thank you for letting me speak the other night." And he said, "Oh, we were so glad to have you." And I said, "I need to ask you a question about this check." He goes, "Oh, is there a problem?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, it's blank. And my wife is wondering, since you gave us a blank check, if we should pay off the house or pay off the car." And this wise old saint, in his deep wisdom, calmly said, "Well, Brother Lonnie, if you really believe it's a blank check, you pay them both. If you really believe it's a blank check, if you really believe the amount is to be filled in to fit your need, if you really believe you have a blank check, then you don't have to ask how much you get to spend." You see, when they fill it in, when they put the numbers there and they spell those numbers out, you don't have to ask how much you can spend. You know that's been designated. But a real blank check, the amount is up to your imagination. How much can I spend? Well, how many zeros and commas can you actually make? God has given us a blank check. First and foremost, this is not about cheap grace. It is about immeasurable grace. God gave us a blank check. Not the freedom to do, but the freedom from the things we've done. And the blank check covers it all. It covers grace and mercy and peace and blessings, and it covers sin. It's not a debit account that we draw from, but it is an account that allows us to be debt or debit free. Free from sin, free from law, free from death, free from worry, free from doubt, free from fear. And this check is written in blood. And there's an assurance that this check is authentic. And it's actually found in the folding. Now, it's not folded like a church check, and it's not even a real check. It's not a thing you can touch or handle. But there's this blank check God has given us, and we know that it's good for the amount, any amount you need, and it's authentic, and it covers all the expenses and allows us to be free and debt-free and gives us the power and the resources to give freely to others. The amount is not specified because the amount is immeasurable. But the authenticity of the check, the guarantee of the check, is not found in the folding or the unfolding of the check. You find the guarantee, you find that the funds are there because they found some grave clothes. In an empty tomb, they found some grave clothes. And those clothes were folded. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707. 615-371-8707, or you can go to 3W's worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. The mission of Heritage Christian University is simple. They aim to advance the churches of Christ by equipping servants through undergraduate and graduate programs. Heritage Christian University produces effective communicators of the gospel, focusing on evangelism and a commitment to Scripture. Heritage Christian University is accredited by the Association for Biblical Higher Education and offers the following degrees: Associate of Arts in Biblical Studies, Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies, Master of Arts, Master of Ministry, and Master of Divinity. Since 1968, Heritage Christian University, formerly International Bible College, has offered affordable degrees in biblical studies, allowing graduates to thrive in their ministries without the burden of loan debt after graduation. For more information about Heritage Christian University, visit www.hcu.edu. That's 3W's and a dot, hcu.edu. Heritage Christian University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.